Explain to us sort of the background, the context to this. What is it that Prince Harry wants to happen?
Which is a long-term campaign from Harry. And in fact, he has offered to pay for his own security, but that security would come from the British police force. Now, that is an arrangement that has so far been rejected by the government. And so Harry has had to use private security firms when he has visited the United Kingdom. He would like to use the police force because, of course, the British police force know better than anybody else how it is to protect members of the British royal family. So we wait to see what the resolution of this particular case will be.
Is it that if he paid for it, but it was based in terms of British security forces, Ed, that they would have information, access to certain information and also resources? Is that what causes this issue?
I think it is. It's also the case that the idea of an individual, and you said it at the top of this slot, that an individual, a private individual, isn't allowed to get, if you like, British police security. This is something normally given to ministers of state and, of course, members of the British royal family, as well as other British VIPs. But it's not something that an individual, a private individual, can have access to, and that is what Prince Harry is currently.
And I mean, there was interesting in our opening, we were talking about celebrity. One of somebody's comments. I'm in the camp that says, and I've said it at a long time, if that's what you want to do, escape the goldfish bowl, my hat is off to you, go and do it. But unfortunately, they land in America, they sell their soul to criticise the very thing that sometimes when it suits them, they want to be part of. And I'm very... Listen, he is, of course, a member of the royal family, but he's not a working royal. He's given himself celebrity status by everything that he's signed with Netflix and Spotify and whatever. And I don't think you can have your cake and eat it. That's just how I see it. I genuinely do.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the original moment when Harry and Meghan left the United Kingdom. They did so, if you like, under the old conditions, which was you're either a part of this family or you're not a part of this family. And if you're a part of this family, you'll enjoy the privileges and the advantages of being part of this family. But if you leave us, then many of those privileges and advantages will be cut off to you. A new, if you like, formula was not found. There have been other royal commentators, historians like myself, that have argued that a new formula could have been found to try and accommodate Harry and Meghan in some way as to keep them closer, if you like, to the family. Because many of the problems that have developed since early 2020 arguably could have been avoided if there had been a new kind of formula.
You could also use the argument, my friend, that the royal family are sick and tired of having them nearby and want them as far away as possible, because any time they come nearby, and I lived on the Long Walk for 7 years, the old man worked for the Queen Mother for 40 years, anything that's said that those two ends up in the newspaper or a book. That's the concern. Absolutely, that's the concern.
And arguably that would never have happened if a better formula for keeping a closer part of the family in the first place had been established. That wasn't established. Look, we're living with the current reality, you're absolutely right that it has been a year full of toxicity and poison. So
do you see it changing?
Pardon, say again?
Do you see it ever changing?
This is an interesting moment. We've got a king who is sick, and I think from that moment onwards, it has raised questions as to whether there could be some kind of formal reconciliation. I think that could only be positive and probably good for the family. Whether the British public agree is another thing altogether.
Well, joining us now is talkTV's royal editor, Sarah Hewson. Sarah, remind us of the context of this case. Prince Harry says, I want this police protection and I'm prepared to pay for it, but the court doesn't agree.
Yes, so when Prince Harry and Meghan left the United Kingdom, their security was reviewed and the automatic right to taxpayer-funded, if I can get my words out, security provided by the Metropolitan Police disappeared. They lost that right. Prince Harry argues that they should maintain that right when they return to the United Kingdom. He had previously offered to pay for it. That was refused.
Why? That's the bit people don't understand.
Well, the reason that was refused was because of the precedent that it might set, that these would be kind of guns for hire, and that any wealthy individual coming into the United Kingdom could say, I want to pay for Metropolitan Police security when I come in, and that wouldn't set a healthy precedent and wouldn't look good to the taxpayer here, who is wondering where their Bobby on the beat is. OK, they're separate, but it isn't the right message to be sending out. But he has argued, as you said, that his family aren't safe to return to the United Kingdom without this level of security. The issue is whether it's automatic or whether it will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And if that's what is decided, then he'd have to give 12 weeks' notice of any visit back to the UK. When he came back for the coronation, for example, and indeed, we believe when he came back to visit his father, he was indeed given police protection then, and he becomes part of that royal protection umbrella. But it doesn't happen automatically if he and Meghan were just to come back.
What are the consequences if this doesn't go his way? Does that mean fewer trips for the family here?
Yeah, and the timing of this is really interesting because we believe that Harry's planning a visit back to the UK in May, and that he would like to bring his family back with him for
Where are they going to stay?
At St Paul's Cathedral to mark 10 years since the Invictus Games. Well, that's another question, isn't it? Because they don't have a base here in the UK. When he came back to visit his father, he stayed in a hotel on that occasion. There are royal properties that they can ask permission to stay in, but it, again, isn't automatic. They don't have a home here, having handed over the keys to Frogmore
What's
Cottage.
your view on it?
I think it's a really difficult one. Yes, he's the son of the king, and therefore he is a target. He also served in Afghanistan. We know that has made him more of a target. We know that Meghan has had threats from the far right. So they are very, very concerned about their security. But it's a very difficult one, isn't it, to sell to the taxpayer, to say, you're going to be paying for this family. They're no longer working royals. They don't represent the royal family on the royal stage, on the public stage, and they made a decision to move out of the country.
And only when they choose to come back, if and when. And I think that's the point. And if we get it away, I mean, there's obviously anger with certain people and other people. It's one of those situations, I think, where people have very strong views about it. I mean, for me, you used a word that was quite interesting. Every A-list celebrity that flies into the United Kingdom could ask for Metropolitan Police armed security guards. I mean, for me, you can say he's the son of the king, but he chose that celebrity lifestyle. The minute he signed...
choose the family he was born into.
No, I mean, he chose Netflix and Spotify and everything, and I was very complimentary when you were aware about the Invictus Games. But we know that with them comes baggage. And I made a point earlier, and I'd love your take on this. Certainly, William, who we'll talk about in a minute, he doesn't trust him. He doesn't trust that anything that is said will not be repeated. And that's a major issue for the royal family. And I think not enough is said about that, because I think the royal family from top to bottom are concerned that if they give or do anything or divulge, it will be in a newspaper or a book.
What's really interesting is, since that visit back to his father, Harry's remained really tight-lipped about it. He did that interview with Good Morning America, and he didn't reveal very much at all, except that it was, you know, he was grateful for the time.
Yet,
I think he does want a reconciliation with his family. There is a massive trust issue, you're right, and the royal family very concerned that any private conversations they have might end up in the public domain, whether that's in a documentary or a book or an interview somewhere. But I definitely saw a shift in tone from Harry in that latest interview, not giving very much away at all, and actually making the point that's private.
Do we, the taxpayer, pay to protect this non-frontline, non-working royal when he comes to Britain? He's challenged the Home Office on that. He thinks he should get protection. He will find out. I think it's about 10:30 this morning. Yes or no? Personally, I'm hoping it is a great right royal no. Why should we be paying for this guy?
It gets really knotty because he said, oh, look, I'll pick up the tab. I don't know whether he said that after this, you know, broke into the public domain. He's also said, well, look, I'd bring my own security guards from America, but they're not allowed to carry guns in the country because they're not, you know,
they're not the police. They're not the police.
And so if he was going to have armed protection, he would need to have it from the Metropolitan Police. And because, you know, that costs us money and he's not a working royal, is he entitled to it? But if he's invited to royal functions, like when we saw when he came to visit his dad, they laid out the sort of full cavalcade of protection, or the vehicle convoys. So I think if he's doing something as a working royal or coming to do a royal-related thing, then that's sort of there anyway. So this really is a man saying, well, if I want to just come on Ollie Bobs or do some of my other, you know, ribbon-cutting jazz hands work, then you've got to pay for me to be safe.
Jazz hands. I don't know. Well, ribbon-cutting jazz hands. Yeah, the royals, that's all
Try
they do.
cutting a ribbon with
That's
jazz
all the
hands.
royals
That's
do.
a
They
bit
cut
difficult.
ribbons and they do jazz hands. But seriously,
hands, jazz
yeah, I
hands.
mean, if he's hanging out with his dad or William or something, that's pretty unlikely. But if he is, the Royal Protection Squad will be there anyway. But if he's on his own, no, and thrice no. High Court Judge Peter Lane will deliver the ruling in a written statement at 10:30 a.m. and we should not have to pay for his protection.
There is a way
And
around
by the way, Alex, one last point. He said, "Well, I'll pay for the police." They're not for hire, mate. They're not a private security force. No one pays for the police to protect them. That's it. So you can't go down that road.
Some breaking news in the last few minutes related to Prince Harry. As you'll know, he has been bringing a High Court challenge against the government, against his own, well, His Majesty's government, extraordinarily, his father's government, over a decision to change the level of his personal security when visiting the UK. This is all about whether or not he can get high-level security, sort of police protection whenever he's in the UK, as opposed to the decision-making of the Home Office. Of course, recently when he came over, he did have security. Sometimes he doesn't. Yes. Well, he has, in the last few months, lost his legal challenge against the government's decision to take away his automatic police protection when he's in the UK. His lawyers had argued that he was singled out and treated less favourably in the decision to change the level of his taxpayer-funded personal security. And it was claimed that a failure to carry out a risk analysis and fully consider the impact of a successful attack on him meant the approach to his protection was unlawful and unfair. But he has lost that legal challenge. It was a hearing back in December, and retired High Court Judge Sir Peter Lane was in charge of making that decision. He's issued his ruling today and said that he was not singled out and that he doesn't he doesn't need necessarily to have security every time. And it's going to be up to this, of course, this is the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures. Who to decide. I'm of the view that the man needs protection. I don't understand why he'd need protection because he comes over to the coronation, but he doesn't need protection when he comes over seeing his family or doing something else. It seems to me that this is a man who is at risk because he is the king's son.
Yes.
Whether people like it or not, and that he is a man who fought very, very, very proudly and very publicly for our country in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And those are the two reasons why he is at risk. And I don't think that he should ever be put at risk.
No, I agree with you. And I think that a lot of people don't take that view because they're very critical of Harry. But I think...
I'm critical of Harry, but I still think it's their life.
Yes, no, I agree. I mean, he was born into a very high-profile position. It's true some of the fighting he did in Afghanistan also makes him a target. But I think as well with Harry, there was a little bit of poor planning. People did warn him, if you leave royal duties and go to California, you might lose your security.
But he either needs his security or he doesn't.
Yes.
This is my view. I just find it extraordinary. But anyway, he has lost that legal challenge in the High Court. So we'll be seeing more on that. Prince Harry's security, never away from the news very long, is he? But he has lost his High Court challenge, a legal challenge against the government. Bearing in mind it's His Majesty's government. Of course, he brought this challenge when it was Her Majesty's government, his late grandmother. But basically, the King's government, is the decision to take away his police protection when he's in the UK as a default thing. He obviously, at one point, remember, we've heard him say that he'd be willing to pay for having Metropolitan Police officers, armed officers to look after him because he can't bring his own armed security from America, where he lives in Montecito in California. His lawyers had argued that he was singled out, he was treated less favourably. The decision to basically change the level of his taxpayer-funded personal security is basically not automatic, and that the impact of a successful attack on him meant the approach to his protection had not been fully considered and was unlawful and unfair. High Court Judge Sir Peter Lane, retired from the High Court, he rejected the case in a ruling just earlier this morning. He ruled that the decision to remove police protection was not unlawful or irrational and that there had been no procedural unfairness. And he said even if there had been such, the court would in any event be prevented from granting the claimant relief because basically he doesn't think there would have been any substantial difference.
Yes.
Basically, the committee that decides how much security he gets has said you don't need it anymore. Do you think they're right, though?
It's interesting because, you know, what he was saying was, in terms of the legal argument that was put forward, they said they don't think he's been singled out. They don't think that there's a particular threat. So in that way, yes, so he lost the case because his legal argument wasn't convincing. But I think a lot of us who look at Harry and look at what a high-profile figure he is would say, well, actually, you know, someone like that probably does need protection.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's the son of the king. So is Prince William. Prince William has round-the-clock security.
Yes.
But Prince William didn't serve in Afghanistan. Prince Harry did.
I know.
And Matthew, it's interesting talking to a guest earlier who was a former Armed Forces Minister, former military man himself, saying, look, you know, he chose to leave the royal family, but he didn't leave the royal. He left as a working royal.
Yes.
He's still a member of the family.
Yes.
He didn't have a God, I've got no time for Harry and his whinging and his money making and his wife and any of that. But you know, he fought for his country.
Yes.
He fought on our behalf, and he was born into a family through no choice of his own. And I think those two things combined make him a target.
Yes.
And puts him at risk. And it seems to me he needs security.
Yes. I mean, maybe he doesn't.
And we should pay for it.
Maybe he doesn't need the same level of his brother. Maybe there was some sort of deal that could be struck. It's a bit of a pity that that did not happen. One point I will make, though, against Harry in this regard is he was warned about that, about leaving the royal family could mean, as a working royal.
You can't leave that job because your life might be at risk. I just don't,
It's horrible. I don't think that I think that to be born into that sort of rigidity must be terrible,
I said, I've always said I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but there we are. Joining me right now to discuss this is former Met Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Good afternoon to you, Peter. Thanks for joining us at short notice.
You're very welcome.
What do you make of this decision? Do you think it was the right one?
Well, I'd also like to add that on my CV is former close protection operative.
Ah, yes.
I've worked in the commercial sector as a bodyguard, to apply the common title. And quite frankly, this is going to be a crushing blow to Prince Harry. And I think we are going to see him on these shores very, very rarely. And the reason being is that private close protection security for both him, his wife, his children, his home or homes, if he has more than one, is eye-wateringly expensive.
Yeah.
As is the protection rightfully afforded to our royal family.
Yeah. It's not just having a couple of blokes going with you. It's 24/7. You need 3 different shifts, number of different people. They need to have accommodation. I mean, you're into huge sums very quickly.
Absolutely astonishing. At the very minimum, you'll need 2 shifts, 2 12-hour shifts. Operatives need to be suitably rewarded for not only the hours they work, but the risk that they take and the danger they may potentially face, and their expertise, their training, and the expensive process to go through to get licensed. And at the very minimum, you need 3 fully staffed vehicles, an advanced car, the car in which your principal, the person you're protecting, travels, and of course, a backup team. It is shockingly expensive. And part of the reason that protection expenses are never shown in terms of the cost of the royal family to the nation every year is because it would be a staggering figure. And whilst we've heard large numbers that apparently Harry and Meghan have earned from various broadcasters and streaming sources and the such like, that money will go in a relative blink of an eye if they want close protection.
Although they do have to pay for it in the States, don't they? But given that he didn't have a choice about being born into the royal family. People say, well, he chose to leave the royal family. Well, he didn't. He's still the king's son, just as Prince William is, although he's not direct heir to the throne. He is, he is still a target. We know that. He must be. But also, he fought in Afghanistan, which makes him an extra big target. I mean, I find it extraordinary that the authorities think that he's not.
I applaud him for his service to the country. Of course, I think that's incredibly laudable and a wonderful thing to do. But to a certain extent, he's made his bed, so he's got to lie in it. And this decision clearly says today, if he comes to the UK, he will not be afforded state-funded police protection. And that is going to be a considerable issue for him, I think. That is why we will see him very rarely on these shores. But as much as they might have earned huge sums of money, the protection they are afforded in the States is likewise incredibly expensive, and 24/7, 365 close protection that will keep you safe is the preserve of billionaires and royalty and prime ministers. It will be way beyond their means in a very short space of time because, of course, they are a couple of very limited talents, and the dirge that they put out is not going to afford them lifelong close protection for them and their kids.
No, that is certainly true. It is the case. We don't know whether he's going to challenge again. I mean, again, this is a man who's launched, is it 10 different lawsuits in the last few years, various related to his own privacy and hacking and police protection. But the discomfort of a royal prince bringing a case against a government and a decision of an executive sort of government committee like this is all rather uncomfortable. But again, the thing I find bizarre is that when he arrives for, say, the coronation or the Queen's funeral, he gets given protection. And he was given a police escort, was he not, when he arrived to visit the King, when he was after he was diagnosed with cancer and it was made public, and he dashed in and had those 30 minutes with the King. He was raced through the airport, raced to the King and the King's side, and then taken back, just back again. Why does he get security for that, but he doesn't on another occasion? What's the difference?
Well, because, of course, the Metropolitan Police close protection teams that look after His Majesty and other significant royals do not want some untrusted, untested, potentially two-bob, two-bit team of security guards coming up to and being in the close presence of the King. It makes sense to temporarily give him protection that can be trusted and relied upon and is armed. Because, of course, private companies in the UK are not allowed to carry firearms.
Which has always been Prince Harry's concern, that he can't bring his own armed protection from America. Peter Blexley, so appreciate your... No, you say you can?
No, absolutely not. No,
okay, I was just I messed up. Really appreciate you joining us, not just a former Met detective, but close protection officer, bringing your expertise. Thank you, as always, for that, Peter.